Today, I'm telling you a story so powerful it lingers long after the last word, set in the unforgiving American West, where fire lights the night sky and survival is never guaranteed. It unfolds in a land where dust, blood, and destiny collide, where one choice can pull two lives into the same storm. It began with a single moment, a small act of defiance in the midst of chaos, yet strong enough to shatter a home, redraw loyalties, and force a woman to choose between the world she was born into and the one she never expected to understand. Before we kick off this adventure, don't forget to hit like on the video and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. The night above the Whitlock Ranch burned the color of molten copper as the barn collapsed in flames, sparks leaping high and throwing warped shadows across the yard where bodies lay unmoving. Varel Whitlock pressed her back to the adobe wall of the main house, her father's Winchester dragging at her arms, its weight magnified by the tremor in her hands. Smoke clawed at her eyes and throat. She blinked hard, forcing herself to see through the chaos. Her fingers tightened on the rifle stock, then loosened. She stayed hidden. Her father's last words rang in her head, steady as a bell in a storm. Stay quiet. Stay alive. Hooves thundered closer. Through the smoke, she caught sight of painted riders astride their horses, faces hard and feral in the firelight. Apache. The word had stalked her dreams since childhood, whispered by the hands who worked her father's land. A figure staggered out of the burning barn. Her brother, Thane Whitlock. He lurched forward, white shirt soaked dark with blood. Varel bit her knuckle to smother a scream as he dropped to his knees. A warrior dismounted. A tomahawk rose. No! The cry tore free before she could stop it. A head snapped toward her hiding place. Varel raised the Winchester, but her hands shook too badly to steady the barrel. The shot went wild, ricocheting off the stone fountain. Riders wheeled. She fumbled to reload, cartridges spilling uselessly into the dirt. Hands like iron seized the rifle, wrenching it away. Varel fought like a cornered cat, nails and teeth driven by terror and rage. Stop! A deep voice cut through the noise, English edged with an unfamiliar cadence. The grip eased, just enough. Varel looked up into a face both striking and terrible. Sharp cheekbones streaked with black, eyes dark and searching, unlike the others. There was no triumph there, no hunger. He studied her as if reading signs in sand. "Let me go," she snarled, Spanish breaking into English. "Kill me if you must, but be quick." The corner of his mouth lifted. "You think I want your death? What else do men like you want?" Varel spat at his boots. "You've taken everything, my home, my family. Take my body too, if it pleases you. It's only flesh." His hands closed around her wrists, firm but controlled. "You speak as if body and spirit are separate," he said carefully. "That is your people's thinking, not mine." A call rang out behind him in Apache. Urgent. Varel didn't understand the words, only the tension. The house caught, flames licking the blue-painted frames her mother, Selfa Whitlock, had chosen to match the Texas sky. The man holding her answered with a few clipped words. Others deferred. A leader. He looked back at her. "I am Zyrech." "I don't care what they call you," Varel snapped, wrenching again. "You're all the same, raiders, killers. Who, what?" His tone stayed calm, almost curious. "Who take what we need to survive? Who fight for our land as your father fought for his?" He gestured to the burning buildings. "This ranch sits on Apache ground. Your father knew it when he built here. That doesn't give you the right to murder innocents." "Innocent." He tasted the word. "Your father's men shot my cousin last moon for crossing his land, a boy of 14, hunting antelope." His gaze never left hers. "I did not come for revenge." Then why? Her voice broke. Because of a vision. He released one wrist and touched the medicine bundle at his belt. A white woman with storm-bright eyes and hair like earth after rain, strong enough to stand between worlds. Virel laughed, high and raw. You're mad. I'm no one special. Just a rancher's daughter who barely speaks proper English. You fought when others hid, Zyrech said. You fired when grown men dropped their guns. His thumb brushed her wrist, finding her pulse. Your body shakes with fear. Your spirit burns like the fire around us. Shouts erupted at the far end of the yard. Soldiers, blue frontier corps, drawn by the blaze. Hope surged in Virel's chest. Zyrech's expression didn't change. In one smooth motion he pulled her against him and vaulted onto his paint horse. She landed in front of him, his arm a band of iron at her waist. No, the soldiers will save me. She twisted, trying to throw herself free. Save you? His breath was warm at her ear as he turned the horse away from the approaching cavalry. They shoot first and ask questions of the dead. Do you think they would see Virel Whitlock through smoke and darkness, he said, or only a woman riding with Apache? The truth of it struck her just as gunfire cracked behind them. Bullets hissed past, ripping the air. Zyrech forced her low against the horse's neck, his body shielding hers as if by instinct. Around them, the Stonevale riders fired back while melting into the desert night. Her last glimpse of home burned itself into memory. The high walls her grandfather had raised, the small chapel where Selfa Whitlock prayed each dawn, the corrals where she learned to ride, all of it swallowed by fire, reduced to embers beneath a blackened sky. Why me? Virel whispered. Tears finally came. Of all the women you could have taken, why me? Zyrech's answer drifted back to her, nearly lost to the rhythm of hooves. Because you were the only one who looked at me and saw a man, not a monster, even in fear, even in anger. You saw me as human. This is what my vision showed, he went on, not a captive to be broken, but a woman strong enough to choose. Virel closed her eyes, hollowed by loss and exhaustion, aware of the strange closeness of riding pressed to a warrior who spoke in riddles. She did not believe in visions or fate. Yet as the burning ranch fell away and the vast darkness of Apache land opened before them, she wondered if belief mattered once a choice had already been made. Night wind carried sage and the promise of rain, stripping smoke from her hair and clothes. Somewhere far off, a coyote cried. Lonely, defiant, alive. She listened, as if the dark itself might answer her in a language she was only beginning to hear. Dawn rose like a brass coin, already hot. Thirst burned her throat. Her lips cracked in the desert wind. 3 days of hard riding carried them deep into open country where the horizon ran unbroken. Virel rode a sturdy bay taken from Oris Whitlock's herd, rawhide binding her wrists to the saddle horn. Zyrech rode beside her, silent. The others fanned out, some scouting ahead, others guarding the back trail. No cavalry followed. Water, Virel croaked, hating the weakness in her voice. Zyrech studied the western sky, clouds gathering like distant smoke. Without a word, he turned toward cottonwoods marking a hidden stream. The riders followed, trusting him without question. At the water's edge, Virel waited, pride drying like cracked earth as no one looked her way. Please, she said at last. I need to drink. Zyrech dismounted, drew a knife. She flinched, then cut the rawhide and stepped back. She slid down on shaking legs and stumbled to the stream, drinking deeply, splashing her face and neck. You could run, Zyrech said. The mare is strong. You know horses. Where would I go? She straightened, water dripping from her chin. 100 miles from any settlement. I'd die of thirst or fall into a canyon. Is that what you want? To watch me choose my own death? I want you to understand you have choices, he said, offering dried meat. Even here, even now. She ate slowly, tough, salty. Her stomach welcomed it. Some choice, she muttered. Stay with my family's killers, or die alone. Your brother lives. The words struck her like a blow. What? The young man at the barn, Zyrech said. Wounded, not killed. My warriors do not make war on those who cannot fight back. His face stayed composed, but something flickered in his eyes. The old woman who screamed, she died of fear, not by our hands. Virel pressed her palms to her eyes. Maria. The cook's kindness, her stories over kneaded bread. How do you know? Orin returned while you slept. He watched from the hills. Your brother was taken to the fort with other survivors. Other survivors. Hope flared, tangled with confusion. Then why? She demanded. Why burn everything? Why take me? Your father's ranch was a message. To soldiers, to settlers pushing deeper each season. He paused. But you were not part of the plan. A younger warrior approached, speaking fast in Apache. Tension sharpened his voice. His glances cut toward her. Zyrech answered calmly, but the gestures grew heated. What is he saying? Virel asked. Rex believes bringing you was a mistake, Zyrech replied. He says you will slow us down, bring trouble. A faint curve touched Zyrech's mouth. He thinks I am bewitched by your pale skin. Heat rushed into Virel Whitlock's face. Are you? She asked. If I wanted only beauty, I would have chosen differently. His bluntness caught her off guard. You are sun-hardened, Zyrech went on. Strong from work, not soft like the officers' wives at the fort. Your hands are marked by reins and rope. You are not what my riders imagine when they speak of white women. Then what am I? The question slipped out before she could stop it. Zyrech was silent, watching light ripple across the water. You are a question, he said at last. One I do not yet know how to answer. They rode through the afternoon heat at a steady, unrelenting pace. Virel found herself observing how the Stonevale riders moved through the land, how they read broken twigs and scuffed earth, chose routes that promised shade or water. Against her will, she felt a flicker of respect for their precision, their intimate understanding of the desert. When they halted to rest the horses, she watched Zira mend a broken bridle with quick, practiced hands. Nearby, a youth barely past boyhood shared his water with another whose skin bag had split. You're not what I expected, Virel said quietly to Zyrech. What did you expect? She considered lying, then felt too tired for it. Bloodthirsty savages, men who lived only for killing and plunder. She nodded toward two riders laughing over some private joke. Not this. We are what we must be, Zyrech said. Sometimes warriors. Yes, but also fathers, brothers, sons. We laugh, we grieve, we love our children and honor our elders. Does that surprise you? Everything does. She rubbed her wrists where the rawhide had bitten. Including you, especially you. That evening they made camp in a box canyon sheltered from the wind. Virel braced herself to be bound again, but Zyrech only pointed to a place near the fire. Sleep there. If you run, the desert will finish you faster than any blade. She lay on the hard ground, her folded skirt beneath her head. Around her, the Stonevale riders tended horses, cooked, repaired gear. The scene felt oddly domestic, quiet, almost calm. An older warrior approached with a wooden bowl. Gray threaded his braids. Scars mapped a lifetime across his arms. He set the bowl beside her. Thin stew, rich with sage and rabbit. "Thank you," Virel said in Spanish. Then, carefully, "Thank you." The man's weathered face creased in something like amusement. He spoke in Apache and walked away. "What did he say?" Virel asked. "He said you have good manners for a captive," Zyrech replied, "and that you sit a horse well." Zyrech settled opposite her, across the fire. "Korth rarely speaks to outsiders. That he brought you food matters." Virel ate slowly, surprised by the flavor. "Everything about this is strange. I should hate you. I should be planning revenge or escape." Her voice faltered. "But I'm beginning to see my world was smaller than I believed, that there may be other ways to understand things." She met his gaze. "That doesn't mean I forgive what happened. My home is gone. People I loved are dead or scattered." "Forgiveness is not required," Zyrech said. "Only understanding. Only the will to see." That night she lay awake, listening to horses breathe, to low voices in a language she did not know. Wolves howled in the distance. Above her, stars crowded the sky, more than she had ever seen from her bedroom window. When sleep came, it carried no fire. She dreamed of open grassland, of riding beside a man whose dark eyes held questions she wasn't ready to answer. Her hands were free. She could have turned back. She did not. She woke to Zyrech watching her from across the cold ashes of the fire, his face unreadable in the pale dark. For a moment they simply looked at each other, captive and guardian, woman and warrior, two lives caught between worlds bound to collide. "Today we reach the main camp," he said. "My people will be curious. Some will be hostile. You must decide who you will be among them." Virel sat up, brushing dust from her hair. "I'm your prisoner. What choice do I have?" "You are only a prisoner if you choose to be." Zyrech rose, moving with quiet ease into the morning. "I told you I see something different in you," Zyrech said. "The question is whether you will learn to see it in yourself." As the camp stirred awake around them, Virel Whitlock wondered if she possessed the strength to find that answer. The Stonevale camp spread along a shallow creek bed. Dozens of hide lodges stood in deliberate order, their placement guided by rules Virel did not yet understand. Dogs barked at the returning riders, and children ran alongside the Stonevale riders, shouting greetings and questions. Women paused in their work to watch. Curiosity flickered in some faces, open resentment in others when they noticed Virel. Zyrech dismounted beside a large lodge painted with running horses. An older woman stepped out. Tall, composed, silver threading her hair, sharp eyes missing nothing. She spoke quickly to Zyrech in Apache, her gaze never leaving Virel. "My mother," Zyrech said quietly. "Nayli. She asks why I bring trouble to our lodge." Virel slid down from the horse, suddenly aware of her torn dress, tangled hair, and blistered skin. She inclined her head in what she hoped was respect. Nayli's expression did not soften. She gestured sharply toward the lodge. Inside, the space was orderly. Painted storage cases lined the walls. Buffalo robes covered the ground. Weapons hung from the poles. The air smelled of smoke, leather, and unfamiliar herbs. Nayli thrust a bundle of clothing into Virel's arms, a soft hide dress, leggings, moccasins, then pointed to a water basket, miming washing. Virel changed behind a painted screen, grateful to shed her ruined dress. The clothing felt strange but practical. When she emerged, Nayli studied her, then adjusted the fit with brisk, impersonal hands. A younger woman entered, perhaps 20 summers old, bright-eyed and quick to smile. She carried a bone comb and sat behind Virel without asking, working patiently through the knots. "I am Yisra," she said in careful English, "Zyrech's cousin. You are the woman from the vision?" "I don't know anything about visions," Virel replied, wincing as the comb snagged. "I'm just the woman who fired at 5 warriors and lived." Isra laughed. "The camp speaks of little else. Some say Zyrech has lost his senses. Others remember his visions have never failed." In the days that followed, Virel found herself neither true prisoner nor guest. Zyrech was often gone, hunting or meeting with other leaders. In his absence, Isra became her guide and, unexpectedly, her defender. "You must learn," Isra insisted, pulling her toward the women scraping hides. "Sitting like a stone helps no one." The work was harsher than anything at the ranch. Virel's hands, already rough, blistered anew. Her back burned from hours bent over hides. Laughter followed her mistakes, stinging her pride. One older woman, Thosk, seemed especially hostile. She muttered whenever Virel passed. One morning she knocked over Virel's water basket, soaking hides that had taken hours to prepare. "Why does she hate me?" Virel asked Isra later, fighting tears. "Her son died in a raid last winter," Isra said quietly. "She sees all white people as enemies. But you work beside us. That confuses her anger." Slowly, Virel learned the rhythms of camp life. Dawn meant rekindling fires and cooking the first meal. Days filled with labor, processing meat, gathering roots, mending clothing, repairing lodges. Children ran freely but worked when called. Elders' words carried weight in every choice. There were moments of unexpected beauty. Women decorating garments with intricate beadwork, girls playing games with marked bones, shrieking with laughter, hunters returning with success, the camp erupting in celebration. One evening, Virel sat with Isra, twisting sinew into thread. Across the camp she watched Zyrech teaching boys to string bows, his patience steady as he corrected them again and again. "He would make a good father," Isra said, following her gaze. "Yet he has refused every marriage offer." "The elders worry," Isra continued. "He says the spirits have not shown him his path." "Until now," she added, casting Virel a knowing look. A sudden commotion rose near the horse herd. Warriors mounted quickly, weapons ready. Zyrech appeared, already armed. "Tonkawa scouts," he said sharply. "Too close." Virel had learned enough to know the name meant enemies, often allied with settlers. As the riders disappeared, she found herself holding her breath, surprised by her fear. The clash was brief but violent. The warriors returned with captured horses and wounded. The Stonevale women moved at once, preparing poultices and binding injuries with practiced skill. One boy, scarcely 16, had taken an arrow through the shoulder. The medicine man was away with another band, and the wound could not wait. Virel Whitlock had tended similar injuries alongside her father's vaqueros before doubt could catch her. She dropped to her knees beside the boy. "I can help," she said to Naley, who was preparing to pull the arrow free. "I've done this before." Naley's sharp eyes narrowed, weighing risk and pride. Zyrech gave a single nod. "Let her." Virel steadied her breathing, calling up her father's hard lessons. The arrow had punched clean through, brutal, but survivable. She asked for tools and herbs, grateful when Isra translated without hesitation. With careful hands, she snapped the arrowhead and slid the shaft free, then packed the wound with plants she recognized from the women's gathering baskets. The boy, Oren's cousin, ground his teeth, but did not cry out. When she finished binding the injury, he managed a thin smile and murmured a word she didn't know. "He says thank you," Zyrech translated, something like approval in his voice, "and that you have gentle hands for a fierce woman." That night, the air inside Naley's lodge shifted. At the evening meal, the older woman served Virel first, a small act, heavy with meaning. The next morning, Even Thosk inclined her head as they passed, though her eyes stayed lowered. "You are earning your place," Isra said as they dug prairie turnips. "Not as a captive, as a person. This is rare." Virel loosened soil around a stubborn root. "I'm still a prisoner," she said quietly. "I can't leave." "Can't you?" Isra countered. "You know where the horses are kept. You've learned our routes. Zyrech no longer posts guards." "What keeps you here?" The question followed Virel through the work. Fear of the desert, yes, but she'd learned enough now to risk the journey. If she reached a main trail, the Blue Frontier Corps would find her eventually. That evening she asked Zyrech directly. "Isra says I could leave if I chose. Is that true?" He was fletching arrows, movements spare and precise. "Where would you go?" "Fort Stockton, San Antonio, anywhere but here." She hesitated. "I'd find my brother. Rebuild." "Rebuild what?" Zyrech set the arrow aside. "Your father's ranch on taken ground. Return to a life where you were expected to marry a man chosen for cattle and connections." He stepped closer. "Is that the freedom you want?" "It's my world," Virel said, and heard how thin it sounded. "Is it?" His gaze held hers. "You heal our wounded. You learn our ways. You no longer flinch when children run to you with questions." "That doesn't mean I belong here." "No," he agreed, "but it means your choice is not between captivity and freedom. It is between the woman you were meant to be and the woman you might become." Overwhelmed, Virel turned away. Through the lodge opening, she watched the camp settle, familiar now in ways that unsettled her. When had these people stopped being enemies? When had their rhythms begun to feel almost natural? "I need time," she said at last. Zyrech's hand brushed her shoulder. There, then gone. "Time you have, but seasons turn." "The army grows stronger," he continued. "My people are pressed into smaller circles each year. Whatever you choose cannot wait forever." That night, Virel lay on buffalo robes, listening to sounds she'd come to know. A baby crying, quickly soothed, soft calls as watches changed, an owl calling from the cottonwoods. She thought of Thane Whitlock, wounded but alive. Of the ranch rebuilt or sold. Of the narrow life waiting. Marriage, obedience, decisions made by men. Then she thought of the boy's grateful smile, of Isra's friendship, of the honest ache in her hands after useful work, of Zyrech's dark eyes seeing something in her she was only beginning to see herself. The choice loomed as wide as the prairie sky. For now she set it aside and let the camp's rhythm carry her toward its sleep, dreaming in languages she was only beginning to learn. Near midday, a dust plume rose on the southern horizon like smoke. Virel was helping Isra mend a torn lodge cover when the dogs erupted in frantic barking. Warriors seized weapons and mounted their fastest horses. Women gathered children, ready to scatter. "Soldiers," Zyrech said grimly, lowering a field glass taken in an old raid. "2 companies at least. They're following our trail from the Tonkawa clash." Virel's stomach tightened. A part of her imagined rescue, a return to the old life. Stronger was the fear of what would happen to the camp, to Isra, to the wounded boy still healing, to the children who brought her prairie flowers and tugged at her strange hair. "They'll strike at dawn," Korth said, studying the distant dust. "When we break camp." "Unless they find reason to hesitate," Zyrech said softly. His eyes found Virel Whitlock through the gathered riders. "Come." Inside his lodge, Zyrech laid out the plan with brisk clarity. "They are hunting the raiders who burned the Whitlock Ranch. What if, instead, they find a frightened Mexican trader and his wife, caught between worlds?" "You want me to lie to them?" Virel asked. "I want you to live," he answered evenly. All of us must live. He opened a bundle of clothing taken in past raids, Spanish-cut garments, well kept, including a man's suit that would pass at a distance. You know how soldiers think, how they look. Use that. Virel brushed her fingers over a blue silk dress, finer than anything she had ever owned. And if I betray you? If I tell them exactly where your camp is? Then Isra dies. Oren dies. The children you've taught to count die. His voice never rose, but his eyes burned. I trust you understand the weight of choice. They rode out before sunset. Zyrech remade in a Mexican trader's clothes, Virel beside him in the blue dress that made her feel like a stranger to herself. 4 Stonevale riders rode as guards, their faces carefully painted to hide tribal marks. They camped in plain view along a known trade road, their fire bright against the dark. Virel's hands trembled as she prepared a simple meal, playing the trader's wife, while her thoughts raced. At first light, soldiers appeared, surrounding the camp with practiced precision. The officer in command was young and fair, posture rigid with academy training. Stand and identify yourselves, he ordered, though his gaze lingered on Virel's pale skin and blue dress. Zyrech adopted a nervous Mexican accent. Senor, we are traders. Nothing more. I am Alejandro Reyes. This is my wife, Elena. We were bound for Fort Stockton. Traitors, the lieutenant echoed, doubtful. He gestured at the guards. And these? Protection, senor. The Apache are dangerous. Virel felt the trap forming as the officer's eyes sharpened on the guards. One, Rex, bore a scar the army might know. Lieutenant, Virel cut in, stepping forward with careful desperation. Please, you must help us. We've been running for days. Since what, ma'am? He dismounted, suddenly attentive. Since the attack on the Whitlock Ranch. She pressed a hand to her throat. We were traveling to trade when we saw the smoke. We hid until they passed. The screams. Those poor people. You witnessed the raid. From a distance only. Tears came easily when she remembered the flames. They were painted. 30 at least. They rode north after burning everything. North, the lieutenant repeated, exchanging looks with his sergeant. Their tracks had led west. Zyrech played his part, anxious to please. North, toward the canyonlands. We went west to avoid them. We hired these guards near Presidio. Cost me half my goods. Ah, better than meeting those savages, he finished weakly. The sergeant, older, sun-scarred, studied the guards. They looked savage enough themselves. Tonkawa scouts, Virel said quickly, recalling the recent clash. Former army scouts looking for work. They hate the Apache as much as you do. It was a risk, but it landed. The army used Tonkawa scouts. The hatred was known. The guards slouched into their roles, sullen and obedient. Ma'am, the lieutenant said gently, did you know the Whitlock family? By reputation, Virel managed. Don Oris Whitlock was respected among traders. His daughter, she measured her words. They say she was taken. Poor girl, the lieutenant said with earnest resolve. We'll find her, and make them pay. The questioning dragged on. Zyrech deferred to Virel, the henpecked husband. She spun half-truths and misdirection, describing raiders who looked nothing like the Stonevale riders, offering routes that would carry the soldiers days astray. At last, the lieutenant seemed satisfied. Make haste to Fort Stockton, he advised. These lands aren't safe. Yes, we leave at once, Zyrech agreed. As the soldiers rode out, following Virel's false trail north, the sergeant lingered. His eyes met hers, and for a heartbeat she feared he saw through everything. A curious thing, the sergeant said softly. You speak remarkably fine English for a Mexican trader's wife. Virel Whitlock's pulse thudded, but she kept her smile steady. "My father believed in schooling," she replied. "He said a woman should know many tongues in a world that keeps changing." The sergeant studied her a moment, then dipped his chin. "Wise man. Take care, ma'am. The world's full of dangers, and not all of them paint their faces for war." When the Blue Frontier Corps vanished over a low rise, Virel's knees nearly gave way. Zyrech caught her elbow, steadying her without a word. They held their roles until they were certain no eyes lingered, then rode hard for the new campsite shifted during the night. Back among the lodges, news of their success spread fast. Warriors who had braced for a desperate stand instead lifted Virel's name with rough laughter and relief. Even Thosk pressed a finely beaded hair ornament into Virel's palm, murmuring something that sounded like approval. That night, a small gathering formed. Virel was seated in a place of honor while the Stonevale elders spoke, words she did not grasp, meaning carried clearly by tone and gesture. They were marking her as one who risked herself for the band's survival. Zyrech translated the heart of it. "Korth says you could have purchased your freedom with our blood, but chose another path. That makes you more than a captive," Zyrech added. "Less than one of us, but worthy of respect." "What does that make me?" Virel asked, overwhelmed by the weight of it. "That remains to be seen," Zyrech said. "But tonight, it makes you the woman who confused the bluecoats and saved lives." Later, as the camp settled, Virel walked to the edge of the lodges. The prairie lay open beneath a sky thick with stars. She knew she could still leave. After today, trust would make escape possible. Zyrech stepped beside her, buckskins replacing the trader's clothes. "You're thinking of running?" "I'm thinking of many things." She pulled her shawl tighter against the night air. "Today I lied to my own people, led them away from you. What does that make me?" "Alive," he said simply, "and perhaps beginning to see that your people isn't only skin or birth tongue." She studied his profile in moonlight. "That lieutenant would have killed you all, even the children." "Yes, and you would have fought to the last rider." "Yes," she breathed, "both sides certain they're right. Where's the justice in any of it?" "Justice," Zyrech said with a sad curve of his mouth, "is a luxury for those who write history. Those who live it settle for survival, and small choices that let us sleep." "Do you sleep well?" The question escaped before she could stop it. "Better since you came," he admitted quietly. "You proved understanding is possible, even if peace is not." They stood in companionable silence, clouds sliding across the moon. Virel realized with a jolt that she no longer counted the days since her capture. The truth should have frightened her more than it did. "Teach me," she said suddenly, "your language, your ways. If I'm to live between worlds, I should know both." Zyrech's rare smile changed his face. "Tomorrow we begin. Tonight, rest. You've earned a warrior's sleep." As Virel returned to Nayli's lodge, change settled on her like a new skin. She had crossed a line, chosen a side in a struggle without winners. Yet seeing Isra's relieved smile, hearing the camp's ordinary sounds that might have been silenced forever, she could not regret it. The woman who fled the burning ranch would have recoiled. That woman believed in simple truths, clean lines between civilization and savagery. This new Virel, still forming, understood that truth sprawled wide and tangled as the prairie. Her understanding deepened. She could follow most camp talk now, though her speech came slow. Her hands learned the cadence of hide work. Her eyes read weather signs. Her dreams arrived sometimes in languages neither Spanish nor English. They moved camp 4 times, tracking buffalo, skirting patrols. Now they sheltered in a valley cut deep and protected, springs running clear beneath canyon walls. Here, in relative safety, Zyrech began to share more of himself. "You asked once, 'Why you?' he said one evening as they watched the horse herd. Virel had grown adept with young stock, her gentle methods earning nods even from skeptics. She set aside a bridle and gave him her full attention. "Months among the Stonevale taught you this isn't spoken lightly," Zyrech continued. "3 winters ago, I sought guidance at the sacred springs. My father was gone, and I no longer knew where my road led," Zyrech said quietly. "For 4 days I fasted and prayed. On the 4th night, the spirits showed me a woman standing between 2 rivers, one red with blood, the other clear with hope." He stared into the fire, as if seeing it again. She had hair the color of earth and eyes like a coming storm. Where she stood, the waters began to join. Virel's breath caught. "And you believe I am that woman?" "I knew the moment you fought us at your father's ranch," Zyrech said. "Not only how you looked, but what you carried inside, fierce, yet able to change." He rolled a small stone between his fingers. The vision went further. Children who could walk in both worlds, a time when the fighting might ease, not through conquest, but through understanding. "Children," Virel whispered. "Someday, perhaps, if the woman chooses." His dark eyes held hers. In all the months they had traveled together, he had never spoken of a future beyond staying alive. "I don't know if I can be what your vision asks," Virel said honestly. "Visions show what could be," Zyrech replied. "We make them real through choice." He stood and offered his hand. "Come. There is more you should see." He led her up a narrow trail to a high ledge overlooking the valley. The setting sun washed the stone in gold and crimson. Beneath an overhang, ancient paintings covered the rock. Horses, hunters, symbols she could not read. "My grandfather painted some of these," Zyrech said, tracing a running horse. "His grandfather painted others. Each generation leaves its mark." From his pouch, he took a small pot of pigment. "Today, we add ours." Together they painted 2 figures standing side by side, facing an uncertain horizon. Virel's hand trembled as she added her mark to centuries of memory. "Now you are part of this place's story," Zyrech said softly. "Whatever comes, this remains." Their descent was cut short by shouting below. Riders had arrived, warriors from another band, their horses blown hard from travel. Virel recognized the lead rider at once. Vec. The news was grim. Reinforcements had reached the army posts, not only more men, but new weapons, rapid-firing guns that could mow down riders like grass. Forts were rising in a line, tightening each season. "They mean to cage us," Vec said during the council that night. Virel sat with the Stonevale women, close enough to hear. Talk of reservations spread through the circle, land set aside where the Stonevale riders would be forced to live or vanish. "We fight," younger voices urged. "Drive them back." "With what?" Korth's calm cut through the bravado. "They are many. We are few. Their guns reach farther every year." The debate burned deep into the night. Virel found herself seeing both sides. The settlers desperate for land and safety, the Stonevale fighting for survival. There were no villains here, only people caught in history's grind. Later she found Zyrech alone, staring into dying embers. "What will you do?" she asked. "What I must," he said. "Fight when needed. Seek peace when possible." He looked up. But perhaps the vision meant something else. Not an end to conflict, preserving something through it. "Through me?" Virel asked quietly, sitting closer than her old world would have allowed. "Not saving, Zyrech said, carrying forward, ensuring something survives, even if everything changes. His hand closed over hers. This is why the grandmothers teach you, why you are learning our ways. You are becoming a keeper of memory. The weight of it frightened her. And if I'm not strong enough? You deceived an entire cavalry unit to save children you barely knew, he said. Strength is not your weakness, but the choice must be free. Always. A week later, choice became urgent. Oren, healed and restless, returned from a hunt with dire news. He had been briefly captured in an army ambush and overheard their plans. A massive spring campaign was coming. All Stonevale bands would be driven onto reservations. Some argued for flight, south, even across the border, living as strangers on foreign ground. Others called for one last stand. The band split. Families packed. Voices rose. Virel watched, dread tightening her chest. No path led anywhere but loss. That night, Zyrech came to her. I must ask something difficult. She nodded, already knowing. Your brother lives, he said. The army believes your words. You proved that. If you went to them, Zyrech said quietly, and spoke of peace, of the chance for negotiation. You want me to leave? The edge in Virel's voice surprised even her. I want you to live, he answered, cupping her face with care, and maybe help others live as well. This is not sending you away. His brow rested against hers. This is asking you to become the bridge the vision showed. And if they don't listen, she said, forcing the words out, if they use me to find you, then you tried. That is all any person can do. His voice softened. Know this. Whatever you choose, wherever you go, you carry part of us with you. In what you know, in what you remember, in your heart. That cannot be taken. Virel closed her eyes beneath the weight of it. Stay, and likely die with the band in the coming storm. Leave, and perhaps find a way to help, at the cost of walking away from those who had become family. When? She whispered. Tomorrow. Loon, Vec's son, will guide you to the fort. He speaks English well enough to see you safe. And after? After is for tomorrow to decide. They sat without words, hands entwined, watching the stars turn overhead. Virel thought of the cliff paintings, of Isra's laughter, of Nayli's wary approval growing into something like affection. She thought of Thane, wounded and alive, and of two worlds pulling apart while she stood between them, belonging fully to neither. Teach me one more thing, she said at last. The prayer you speak at dawn, I want to carry that too. Zyrech's voice was rough as he shared the words, their meaning, the way to greet the rising sun. Virel repeated them until she had them right, another piece of a world she might never see again. At dawn, she stood ready in her Mexican dress, carrying little but memory and knowledge. The camp gathered, some wary, others openly grieving. Isra pressed a small beaded pouch into her hands. For your daughter someday, she whispered, so she knows her other mother. Nayeli surprised them all by pulling Virel into a firm embrace. You take good care of my son's heart, she murmured in broken English. It travels with you. Zyrech walked with them to the edge of camp. His farewell needed no words, his hand at her cheek, a look that said everything. Then he turned back, shoulders straight, chief once more. As Virel rode out with Loon, she looked back only once. Zyrech stood watching, a dark shape against the pale morning. She lifted her hand. He raised his in return. Then the trail bent, and the camp vanished behind canyon walls. She carried more than she had brought, languages, skills, memories, and a way of seeing that would forever set her apart. Above all, She carried questions that might take a lifetime to answer. For now she rode toward an uncertain future, praying in 3 languages that somewhere, somehow, the waters might truly meet. Fort Stockton rose from the desert like a wound made of straight lines in a land of curves. Virel sat taller in her saddle as they approached, aware of Loon's tension beside her. He would go no farther than the outer pickets. "You remember what to say?" he asked one last time. "I remember everything," Virel said. The weight of the band's survival pressed on her like a physical load. Loon studied her with eyes too old for his years. "Zyrech chose well," he said. "Even if the spirits send you down another road. Moifom." Then he slipped away, dissolving into the land with a skill she had only begun to learn. The sentries challenged her at gunpoint, suspicious of a lone woman riding out of Stonevale country. But when she spoke clear, educated English with only a trace of Spanish and gave her name, the reaction was instant. "Dear God," a sergeant breathed. "It's the Whitlock girl. Get the officers, now." Within minutes, Virel Whitlock stood surrounded by soldiers, the desert holding its breath. Voices crashed over her all at once. Someone draped a blanket around her shoulders, though the sun was still high and warm. Another hand pressed a tin cup of water into her palms. Through the noise and concern, Virel Whitlock held tightly to the story she had rehearsed with Zyrech. Confused, shaken, memories blurred by fear and exhaustion. Colonel Alric Vane, commander of Fort Stockton, was a hard-lined veteran with iron-gray hair and eyes sharpened by decades of war. Nothing slipped past him. He questioned her in his office with careful courtesy, while an aide scratched notes across a ledger. "Miss Whitlock," he said evenly, "anything you can tell us about your captors would be invaluable. Numbers, movements, intentions." Virel let her hands tremble slightly as she lifted the teacup. "I'm sorry, Colonel. It's all tangled in my head. They moved constantly. I didn't understand their language. I was kept with the women, away from their councils." "Of course," Vane murmured. "Trauma does that." Yet his gaze never softened. "Still, you must have noticed something. Their leader, for instance." "Zyrech," she whispered, shaping the name like a curse. "Cruel, savage." She let her voice fracture and covered her face. "Take your time," he said gently. "You're safe now." Safe. The word tasted like dust and ash. She gathered herself and fed him a braid of truth and deception. Enough reality to sound honest, enough distortion to mislead. She placed the Stonevale riders far to the south, described Zyrech as older, more brutal than he was, hinted at fractures within the band, weaknesses that could be exploited. "They spoke of Mexico," she added, recalling the council fires. "Some want to flee before spring. They fear the new guns, the number of soldiers coming." Vane leaned forward. "Did they speak of raids? Planned attacks?" "Only survival," Virel said. And that, at least, was true. Buffalo, water, keeping their families alive. The questioning stretched for hours. Virel walked a razor's edge, appearing cooperative while protecting the people she'd left behind. When Colonel Vane finally dismissed her, she felt hollowed out. She was assigned a small room in the officers' quarters. The narrow iron bed felt foreign after months of buffalo robes. The mirror on the wall reflected a stranger. Skin darkened by sun, hands rough with work, eyes carrying more than they once had. A knock came. "Miss Whitlock?" "I'm Mrs. Vane." The colonel's wife entered, pale and carefully corseted, the very image of the life Virel had once been raised toward. Pity and curiosity warred in her expression. "You poor dear," Mrs. Vane said. "We'll have you civilized again in no time. A proper bath, clean clothes, it will do wonders. The bath was both relief and loss. As the dust washed away, Virel felt something essential slipping with it. The corset, Mrs. Vane provided closed around her ribs like a cage. At dinner, she met the fort's families. The women gathered close, hungry for horror. "How dreadful," one whispered, "living like an animal among savages." "Did they hurt you?" another asked delicately. "I was not violated," Virel said firmly, giving them what they wanted without telling the truth. "Zyrech claimed me as his property. No one touched what was his." It was truth twisted to fit their world. They nodded, satisfied. Days settled into a routine. Mornings brought more questions from Colonel Vane and his officers. Afternoons were spent with the fort women, where Virel carefully began planting seeds. "They're not what we imagine," she said once over tea. "The Stonevale people have families, laws, honor in their own way." "Honor?" Mrs. Vane scoffed gently. "My dear, you're suffering from capture sympathy. It will pass." But Virel persisted. Quietly, patiently. She spoke of children playing, of women sharing food, of a hard life shaped by land and loss. Most dismissed her. A few listened. The shift came from an unexpected direction. Lieutenant Silas Merrin sought her out one evening. His expression was tight, thoughtful. "When we met you on the trail," he said softly, "that wasn't real, was it?" Virel's pulse spiked. She kept her face calm. "I'm not sure what you mean, Lieutenant." "I think you do," he replied, stepping closer, voice low. "I've been fighting Apache bands for 3 years. Those weren't Tonkawa scouts with you. And no trader's wife speaks English the way you do." "What do you want?" she asked quietly. "The truth," Merrin said. He glanced around, ensuring they were alone. "And maybe a way to stop what's coming. I've seen the orders. I know what General Amon Crossley is planning." His eyes met hers, steady and grave. "If no one intervenes," he said, "there's going to be a massacre. The army intends to end the Comanche threat for good," Silas Merrin said quietly. "Women, children, it won't matter." Virel Whitlock studied his earnest, tight-drawn face, measuring the danger in every word. "And you object to that?" "I came west to protect settlers," he answered, jaw hardening. "Not to butcher babies. There has to be another way." "What if there is?" Virel said softly. "What if some of the Stonevale riders would talk? Real peace, not surrender." Merrin's eyes sharpened at once. "You're still in contact with them?" "I can be." He hesitated, then nodded. "Colonel Alric Vane wants victory, not negotiation. But others might listen. General Amon Crossley has spoken, quietly, about talks, if the ground is right." He spread a map across the desk. "Cañón del Rescate, neutral ground. Both sides have met there before." Virel fixed the location in her memory. "It would have to happen soon. They're talking about crossing into Mexico before spring." "I can delay my patrol reports 2 weeks," Merrin said. "No more. Miss Whitlock, this puts us both at risk. If Vane finds out—" "Then we make sure he doesn't," Virel said calmly. "You'll need a reason to leave the fort," Merrin added. "Your brother, Thane Whitlock, is recovering in San Antonio. No one would question you wanting to see him." Guilt flickered through her. Thane was alive. She did want to see him. Just not yet. 3 days later, Virel rode out of Fort Stockton with a small escort, officially bound for San Antonio. At the first way station, she claimed sudden illness and insisted the soldiers ride on without her. They protested, then yielded, no man eager to debate a woman's privacy. The moment they disappeared down the trail, Virel changed into the practical clothes hidden in her packs and turned her horse toward the canyons. She knew Zyrech would have eyes on the main routes. She only had to be seen. 2 days passed. Doubt crept in. Then a rider slid out from the rocks like a shadow. Rex. "You return," he said in Comanche, suspicion edged with something like respect. "We thought you chose the white world." "I chose both," Varel answered in his language. "I need Zyrech. There may be a chance for peace. Not much time." Rex studied her a long moment, then turned his horse. "Follow." They found the band in a new canyon, already preparing to move. Her return brought a clash of emotions: relief, fear, fragile hope. Isra crushed her in a fierce embrace. Nelly watched from a distance, eyes sharp, weighing everything. Zyrech emerged from council. His face revealed nothing, but his eyes did. "You came back," he said. "With an offer," Varel replied. "A chance to talk instead of die. Will you hear it?" That night she laid Merrin's proposal before the council. Voices rose. Trust came hard after so many broken promises. But Varel spoke from the ground she had earned, of children, of survival, of what she had seen in the forts. "This may be the last chance to save any part of your way of life," she said. "Yes, it means change, loss. But the other path ends in destruction. I've seen their guns, their numbers. Please, let me try to build this bridge." It was Korth who finally broke the deadlock. "The woman speaks truth. We can die as we always have, or live by changing. I choose life for my grandchildren." Zyrech would lead a small delegation to Cañón del Rescate. Varel would return to arrange the military side. At the edge of camp, Zyrech walked with her. "Each time you leave, I wonder if you'll return." "Each time I return," she said, "I bring more of that world with me. Does that frighten you?" "No," he said. The vision showed a bridge. Bridges must touch both banks. He took her hands. "If this fails, promise me you will live. Carry the knowledge. Let something of us survive." She pulled him close, heedless of watching eyes. "We survive together, or not at all." As she rode away, doubt followed her like a shadow. The forces gathering were vast. Hatred ran deep. All she carried were words, hope, and the fragile trust of a few good souls. It would have to be enough. The tent at Cañón del Rescate stood stark against the red stone, a white mark of truce in a hard land. Vera adjusted her clothing, neither fully Mexican nor American, claiming the space between. Silas Merrin waited beside her, tense but resolute. "They're late," he said. Virel lifted her gaze to the canyon mouth. "Then we wait." Colonel Alric Vane snarled when the news reached him. He had uncovered the plan 3 days earlier, too late to shut it down, soon enough to seize control. An ambush, most likely. Control was his reflex. "They'll come," Varel Whitlock said, steadier than she felt. Zyrech gave his word. "The word of a savage," Vane spat. "Miss Whitlock, I'm here only because General Eamon Crossley ordered it. Mark this. At the first hint of treachery, my men fire." Varel swallowed the retort, burning her tongue. Vane had brought 2 full companies. Guns crouched on the ridges like waiting teeth. This looked like war dressed up as peace. Then 5 riders slipped from the canyon's shadow. Zyrech led them, wearing his finest war shirt. No paint, no weapons in sight. Korth rode at his side, gray hair and calm authority carved by years. The others were men Virel recognized as respected leaders. And one surprise, Vac, the chief who had argued for flight to Mexico. Vane's hand twitched toward his pistol. 5 savages. 5 leaders, Virel corrected, low and firm. They speak for hundreds of families. Would you prefer they bring everyone into cannon range? They met at the tent. The air thickened, heavy as a storm about to break. Virel took her place between them, voice level, heart racing. Zyrech's eyes found hers once. warmth there, gone in a blink. "Tell the soldier chief we come in good faith," Zyrech began, formal and measured. "We seek a path where our children might live." Vane answered without pause. "Surrender. Disarm. Move to the reservation at Fort Sill. Those are the terms." "Prison. Slavery. A slow death," Korth replied when Viral translated. "Those are not terms. They are a sentence." From there, the talks slid downhill. Vane demanded capitulation. The Stonevale leaders spoke of hunting grounds, movement, the right to live as they always had. Even with translation, they might as well have spoken different tongues, farmers and nomads, deeds and seasons, ink and memory. "You cannot continue raiding," Vane insisted. "Settlers have rights." "Rights to land they took," Vec cut in through Virel. "Rights written on papers we cannot read, signed by chiefs who had no authority." Silas Merrin tried to slow the fall. "Perhaps boundaries, specific territories." "We've tried boundaries," Vane snapped. "They violate them." "As settlers violate treaties," Zyrech said calmly when Virel carried his words across. "Yet only we are named lawless. Ours circled back on themselves." Virel's throat burned from translating. Hope drained, drop by drop. The gulf felt impossible. Private ownership against shared land, written law against spoken promise. During a break, Virel found Zyrech by the water barrels. "This is going nowhere," she said in Comanche, voice low. "Vane wants surrender. He can't imagine anything else." "Then make him imagine," Zyrech replied. "You know both worlds. Find the words." "There aren't any," she said. "You're asking for the impossible." "I'm asking for what you've already done," he said softly. His hand brushed hers, gone as quickly as it came. "You fooled soldiers to save children. You learned our ways without losing your own. You stand here for both sides. If anyone can build this bridge, it's you." Virel returned to the tent with resolve hardening in her chest. As the afternoon wore on, she took careful liberties, never twisting meaning, only widening it. When Korth spoke of the buffalo fading away, she added, "Imagine your cattle gone, your crops failed, your children hungry. This is what they face." When Vane demanded an end to raids, she carried the words, and then Zyrech's reason. "We raid when hunting fails, when land shrinks. Give us an honorable way to feed our families, and the raids end." Slowly, painfully, understanding began to form. Merrin helped, framing compromises Vane would not have considered alone. Vec unexpectedly bent once he grasped the alternative was annihilation. The canyon listened. The guns waited. And for the first time that day, the bridge held. Just barely. The break came as the sun kissed the canyon rim. Virel Whitlock offered something neither side expected. A trial. 6 moons. During that time, a portion of Zyrech's band would camp near the fort, not penned on a reservation, but as allies. They would scout hostile groups for the army, track rustlers who preyed on settlers and peaceful tribes alike. In return, they would receive supplies, protection, and time. Time to adjust without being crushed. "You're asking me to trust these people with army intelligence," Colonel Alric Vane snapped. "I'm asking you to try something besides force," Virel shot back, diplomacy frayed by exhaustion. "Colonel, you've fought them for years. Has it worked? Are people safer? Or have you only made more orphans on both sides who grow up burning with hate?" Vane's face darkened, but Silas Merrin stepped in. "Sir, with respect, she's not wrong. We've worked with allied tribes before. The Seminole Scouts in Florida, the Tonkawa here." "Those weren't Comanche," Vane muttered, yet doubt had slipped into his voice. Virel turned to Zyrech, switching to Comanche. "It isn't freedom. It isn't what you wanted. But it's survival. and maybe proof that living together is possible." Zyrech spoke quietly with Korth, Vek, and the others. The debate was fierce and short. They all knew the alternatives. "We will try this path," Zyrech said at last, "but we keep our horses, our language, our ceremonies. We are allies, not servants." "And if it fails?" Vane demanded. "Then we die fighting instead of starving," Korth answered simply. "But at least we will have tried." The agreement was thin, riddled with mistrust and gaps, yet it existed. As preparations began, the weight of it settled on Virel. This fragile peace rested on her words, her bridge between worlds. If it collapsed, blood would follow. Vane drew her aside. "You know what you've staked. Your reputation. Maybe your life." "I've staked everything," Virel said evenly, "just as they have." "They'll turn on you," Vane warned. "When they do, I'll have my war, with a clean conscience." Her patience finally broke. "And if they don't? If this works, imagine what it means. Not just for them, but for every tribe still fighting. A peace that doesn't require erasing who they are." Vane studied her, unreadable. "You speak like you're one of them." "I'm not anyone's," she replied. "That's why I'm useful." As dusk settled, the delegations parted. Virel watched Zyrech ride away, his future uncertain but not finished. Marin stood beside her, thoughtful. "You were extraordinary," he said, "finding common ground where none existed." "I lied," Virel said flatly. He blinked. "About what?" "About meaning. I made each side sound more reasonable to the other than they truly are. This piece is built on careful distortions." Marin nodded. "Then let's hope those distortions grow into truth. Sometimes understanding begins with someone brave enough to imagine it." That night, Virel lay awake in her small quarters, staring at the ceiling. In 6 moons, Zyrech would bring his people here. She would have to guide them through army rules, settler fear, and their own fierce pride. Soldiers would have to learn to see humanity where they'd been taught to see enemies. It felt impossible. Then again, so had everything since the night of fire and choice. She touched the beaded pouch Isra had given her, hidden beneath her pillow. "For your daughter someday." Virel wondered what kind of world that child might inherit. One where she must choose between her heritages, or one where being both simply meant being whole. There were no answers yet. But for the first time since she rode from the burning ranch, Virel Whitlock believed she might live long enough to find them. Tomorrow would bring new trials, new impossibilities, and she would meet them, one bridge at a time. Tonight, she allowed herself a quiet victory, not for the Stonevale riders, and not for the army, but for the dangerous idea that understanding could exist at all. It wasn't much to build a future on, but it was enough to begin. 6 moons had passed. The experimental camp lay a mile from Fort Stockton, close enough for protection, distant enough to preserve pride. Virel Whitlock stood where the 2 worlds touched, watching dawn spill across something that still felt impossible. The lodges formed their old circle, hides and poles arranged with care, while army wagons rolled in each week with supplies. Men who once rode to raid now rode as scouts, tracking rustlers and hostile bands. Children played games stitched together from both cultures, speaking a rough blend of English, Spanish, and Comanche that made elders on both sides wince. Peace had not come easily. 3 times the experiment nearly collapsed. Once when a warrior slaughtered a settler's cow, unaware of private ownership. Once when drunken Blue Frontier Corps soldiers harassed Stonevale women. Once when Zyrech nearly walked away after a humiliating inspection that treated his people like curiosities instead of allies. Each time, Virel had stood between anger and bloodshed, translating, calming, bargaining, holding the fragile thing together with sheer will. "You look worn thin," Isra said, joining her at the edge of camp as the light grew. "I am," Virel admitted. "Tired of being pulled apart. I belong everywhere and nowhere." Isra smiled gently. "You belong to him." Virel followed her gaze. Zyrech stepped from his lodge, moving with the same quiet authority that no uniform or regulation could touch. Their eyes met across the distance, and the pull between them, tempered by trials, felt stronger than ever. Colonel Alric Vane had retired. Major Corvin Ashdown now commanded the fort, younger, less rigid, more willing to test new ideas. The morning council had become routine. Scout reports, supply counts, small disputes. Virel translated without thinking, her attention fixed on what mattered most. Today was the real test. General Amon Crossley himself was coming to judge the experiment. Approval could change everything. Rejection could end it overnight. "Miss Whitlock," Silas Merrin, now Captain Merrin, said as he approached, "the General's party is nearly here." Virel adjusted her dress, a careful blend of frontier cut and Stonevale detail. She had learned that symbols spoke when words failed. Crossley was younger than she expected, sharp-eyed and observant. He moved through the camp with practiced precision, questioning warriors through Virel, inspecting sanitation, morale, discipline. "Show me how this works," he said at last. As if summoned, Zyra rode in hard, dust streaking her leggings. She spoke enough English to report without help. "Rustlers, General. Took cattle from the Hendricks Ranch, headed south, 12 men, armed." "How long ago?" Crossley asked. 6 hours. I know a shorter trail. We catch them by sunset." Crossley turned to his aide, then paused as Zyrech stepped forward. "Your soldiers are brave," Zyrech said through Virel, calm but firm. "They are also loud. My riders know this land. Let us lead." The air tightened. Everyone understood the stakes. Crossley studied Zyrech for a long moment. "Very well. Captain Merrin, 10 men. You follow Chief Zyrech's lead. Bring back the cattle. Bring back the rustlers alive if you can." They rode out together, blue coats and buckskin, authority and instinct bound side by side. "They'll succeed," Virel said, hoping confidence might make it true. Crossley glanced at her. "You're certain?" "Certain enough," she replied. "Miss Whitlock," he said mildly. "Or should I say Mrs. Zyrech?" Heat rushed to her cheeks. "We're not. There's been no ceremony." "Perhaps not," Crossley said with a knowing smile. "But I have eyes. The question is what comes next. This arrangement works largely because of you, but no one can stand between worlds forever. Eventually, you must choose." "Why?" Virel asked quietly. "Why can't I be both?" Crossley considered her. "Show me that it's possible. Children who can read books and read the land. Women who can bead and bake. Men who can be warriors and citizens. Do that, and you'll have my full support." The scouting party returned at dusk, driving recovered cattle and bound rustlers between them. The operation had been flawless. Stonevale tracking and silence paired with military discipline and authority. That night, for the first time, both communities celebrated together. Virel translated jokes, taught dance steps, watched old walls crack. When Zyrech drew her aside, she followed without hesitation. "Crossley spoke to me," he said softly. "He offers recognition, papers, promises, if we formalize this alliance. Korth fears a trap," he continued. "Vec believes it is our only chance." He looked at her. "What do you think?" Virel didn't hesitate. "I think the world is changing, whether we want it to or not." Virel answered him softly. "The real question is whether we guide that change or let it crush us." And us, his hand closed around hers. What becomes of us in this world that's shifting under our feet? For 6 moons, Virel had avoided that question, afraid of the truth waiting behind it. Now, beneath a sky crowded with stars and the sound of 2 peoples learning to laugh together, she finally let herself speak. Yzra says I belong to you. General Crossley assumes we're already married. And your mother has been quietly making wedding preparations she thinks I haven't noticed. She stepped closer, voice steady. Maybe it's time we stop pretending there's still a choice. Zyrech studied her face. You would bind your life to mine, knowing what it will cost you. Suspicion from both sides, hatred that won't disappear. I bound myself to you the night I chose to save the camp instead of seeking rescue, Virel said. Everything since then has just been accepting what my heart already knew. She touched his cheek. But if we do this, we do it fully. A ceremony both worlds can recognize. Children raised in both ways. A life that proves a bridge can hold. The woman from the vision, he murmured, standing where the waters meet. No, Virel said gently. Just a woman who learned that home isn't a place or a bloodline. It's a choice, to stand with someone and face whatever comes. They were married 2 weeks later, after the autumn buffalo hunt brought abundance enough to share. The ceremony wove traditions together, Catholic prayers spoken by priests from San Antonio, vows guided by Stonevale spiritual leaders, words carried in 3 languages. General Crossley stood as witness, lending the weight of authority to what many still called impossible. Virel wore her grandmother's mantilla over a doeskin dress sewn and adorned by Neli and Isra. Zyrech wore his finest, adding one quiet concession to her world, a simple silver ring that caught the firelight. Thane Whitlock came from San Antonio, pale and still weak, but determined to see his sister. His embrace mattered more than any blessing. Papa would be horrified, he admitted honestly. But Mama, I think Selfa would understand. She always said you had too much fire for the life they planned. As dawn crept over the land, Virel stood beside her husband, watching their shared world wake. The work ahead was daunting. Legal fights over land, old wounds, stubborn hatred. Some Stonevale bands still fought. Some settlers still refused to see. Bridging would take generations. But here, in this moment, it had begun. Children ran together across lines that once meant death. Former enemies shared coffee and stories. 2 peoples long taught to destroy one another were learning another way. No regrets? Zyrech asked, his arm around her as the sun rose. None, Virel said without hesitation. We're writing a new story, one that holds both our peoples. It won't be easy. He smiled faintly. The things worth building never are. High above, an eagle rode the warm air between earth and sky. Virel watched it circle and thought of all the boundaries still to cross, all the bridges yet to be built. The vision had been true. Not because she stood between worlds, but because she was helping make room for both to flow together. The future stretched before them, uncertain, fragile, but no longer hopeless. And in that first light, with her husband beside her and 2 communities slowly learning to see each other as human, Virel Whitlock allowed herself to believe that sometimes, against every expectation, understanding could outlast fear. At the line where acacia trees marked the edge between fort and camp, she planted a small garden. Spanish roses grew beside native sage, drawing from the same soil, fed by the same water. Different roots, different blooms, stronger together. It was, she thought, a beginning. Finally, let me send my deep thanks to you. Thank you for giving your time to this story. Some journeys shape us, and we hope this one left a mark on your heart. There are more paths ahead, More legends of love, hardship, and redemption beneath the western sky. Please subscribe, leave your thoughts, and travel with us once again. Thank you, and God bless. Aviso legal. Disclaimer: the stories presented here are creative expressions and may mix historical inspiration with dramatized scenes. AI tools contribute to some elements of voice, imagery, and structure. But every published story is refined by editors and creators to ensure authentic emotional impact. We honor YouTube's policies and do not generate deceptive likenesses or artificial depictions of real people. All audiovisual components are legally licensed. Any use, redistribution, or alteration of this content must be granted through written consent. Your presence here means a lot. Thank you for supporting artistic storytelling.